The first sound that greeted anyone who stepped onto Maple Street was the sound of ticking. It was not the ticking of one clock, or even two, but dozens, no, hundreds of them, each with its own rhythm, filling the air with a strange, steady heartbeat. Some clocks ticked fast, others slow, some loud, others soft, but together they created a music that could not be ignored. At the very end of Maple Street stood an old wooden shop. Its sign, though faded, still read, Augustus Hale, Master Clockmaker. People in the town often passed the shop, but few ever entered. Children dared each other to run up and touch the door, then run away before the old man inside could catch them. Adults spoke in whispers about the clockmaker, calling him peculiar, secretive, even cursed. The strangest thing of all, they said, was this. He never sold a single clock. Not one. For over 40 years, Augustus Hale had worked in that shop, his windows glowing with golden lamplight at night, his shelves filled with clocks of every size and shape, grandfather clocks taller than men, tiny pocket watches that could fit in the palm of a hand, cuckoo clocks with painted birds that never sang. And yet, no one in town owned one of his creations. Why would a man spend his life making clocks only to keep them all? That question hung over Maple Street like a cloud. The clockmaker. Inside the shop, Augustus Hale sat bent over his workbench. His hair, once thick and dark, was now silver and thin, falling over his forehead as he adjusted a pair of small brass gears. His fingers were steady despite his age, his eyes sharp behind his round spectacles. Every movement he made was careful, delicate, like a surgeon at work. The room smelled of oil, wood, and time itself. The walls were lined with clocks, hundreds of them, each alive with motion. Their pendulums swung back and forth, their hands spun, their faces glowed in the lamplight. But Augustus did not smile. He rarely did. His face carried the weight of sorrow, like a man haunted by ghosts only he could see. At that moment he was working on a small golden watch. Its case was engraved with the shape of a rose, delicate and beautiful. When he opened it, the ticking grew louder, and inside the watch was not only gears but something more, a faint light, glowing softly, as if the watch held a living thing inside. Augustus stared at it for a long time, his lips pressing together. He whispered under his breath, almost like a prayer, "Hold steady. Don't fade." The curious child. Most of the townsfolk left Augustus alone, but one person could not. Her name was Clara Whitmore, a 12-year-old girl with fiery red hair and curious green eyes. Clara was known all over town for asking too many questions, climbing trees she shouldn't climb, and sneaking into places she wasn't allowed to go. She lived with her widowed mother in a small house near the bakery, and every day she passed the clockmaker's shop on her way to school. The ticking always called to her. "Why does he never sell them?" she asked her mother one evening at dinner. "Because he's strange, Clara," her mother replied quickly. "Strange men keep strange secrets. Stay away from him." But Clara did not believe in staying away. The more people told her not to do something, the more she wanted to do it. So, one Saturday afternoon, when the streets were quiet and her mother was busy with laundry, Clara crept down Maple Street and stopped in front of the clock shop. The sound of ticking filled her ears, making her heartbeat match its rhythm. She hesitated, then pushed open the door. Inside the shop, the bell above the door gave a soft chime, and immediately the noise of ticking grew louder. Clara's eyes widened. She had never seen so many clocks in her life. They were everywhere, on shelves, on tables, hanging from the ceiling. Some were carved from dark wood, some painted with bright flowers, others simple and plain. All of them were beautiful. At the far end of the room sat Augustus Hale, his back hunched over his workbench. He did not look up at first. Clara cleared her throat. "Hello." Augustus lifted his head slowly. His pale blue eyes studied her, sharp but not unkind. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low and rough. Clara bit her lip, but stood her ground. "I just wanted to see. Everyone says you never sell your clocks." "Why?" The clockmaker's gaze hardened. "Curiosity is dangerous, child." "But clocks are supposed to be sold," Clara pressed. What's the point of making them if no one can have them? Augustus sighed deeply. He set down the golden watch and closed it carefully, as though it were made of glass. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a wave of his hand, he pointed toward the door. Go home, girl. Some questions are better left unanswered. Clara frowned. She wanted to argue, but something in his tone, something heavy and final, kept her quiet. With one last glance at the glowing golden watch, she turned and left the shop. The accident. But Clara was not done. Over the next few days, she returned again and again, peeking through the dusty windows, watching the clockmaker work. She noticed that whenever he opened certain clocks, a strange light glowed inside them, soft and warm, like a memory come alive. What were those lights? One evening, as rain poured down and thunder rolled across the sky, Clara crept once more to the shop. She found the door unlocked, perhaps forgotten in Augustus's hurry to close up before the storm. She stepped inside. The ticking filled the air, louder now, almost like voices whispering. Clara's eyes went to the golden watch on the workbench. Its rose engraving shone in the lamplight. She reached out, her small fingers trembling, and lifted it. The moment she opened it, the light inside flared bright, blinding, alive. And then, the watch slipped from her hand. It hit the floor with a sharp crack. The light burst free, filling the room with a glowing mist. Clara gasped as images swirled around her, faces she didn't know, voices she didn't recognize, laughter, tears, the echo of someone's memory rushing past her like wind. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light faded, leaving the room cold and silent. The watch lay broken on the floor. Behind her, a voice thundered. What have you done? Clara spun around to see Augustus Hale standing in the doorway, his face pale with fury and fear. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, she stammered. But Augustus wasn't listening. He hurried to the broken watch, cradling it in his hands like a wounded bird. His shoulders shook as he whispered, It's gone. Lost forever. Clara's chest tightened. What was inside it? The old man lifted his head slowly, his eyes filled with something she could not understand, grief deeper than words. He spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Memories. And that was the night Clara Whitmore discovered that Augustus Hale's clocks did not measure time. They held it. The storm outside raged on, but inside the clockmaker's shop, silence pressed heavier than thunder. Clara stood frozen, her shoes damp from the rain, her hands trembling at her sides. On the floor between her and Augustus lay the shattered golden watch, its delicate rose engraving cracked, its glow gone forever. Augustus Hale knelt over the pieces, his thin fingers shaking as he tried to fit them back together. But it was useless. No gear, no spring, no tool could restore what had been lost. His shoulders sagged under a weight Clara could not see, and for the first time in her young life, she felt she had broken something that could never be fixed. I'm sorry, Clara whispered. I didn't mean to. Do you have any idea what you've done? Augustus's voice was sharp, but it cracked with sorrow, not anger. His pale blue eyes glistened as he held the broken watch in both hands. This was not just a clock. It was someone's life. Clara swallowed hard, but it was glowing, like it was alive. Augustus's lips pressed into a thin line. He rose slowly to his feet, towering over her though his frame was bent with age. He looked as if he might throw her out and lock the door forever. Instead, he surprised them both by sinking heavily into the chair by his workbench, the watch still clutched in his hand. Sit down, he said at last, his voice rough. Clara hesitated, then obeyed, pulling up a wooden stool. The ticking of hundreds of clocks filled the silence between them. The truth begins. Augustus stared at the broken watch as if it were a gravestone. Then slowly he spoke. Clocks measure time for most people. But these are not ordinary clocks. Each one carries a piece of someone's memory. A laugh. A sorrow. A moment they wish to keep forever. Clara's eyes widened. You mean people gave them to you? He shook his head. No. I took them. Clara's breath caught. You stole them? Augustus flinched at the word, his fingers tightening around the broken watch. Not stole.
Saved.
Memories are fragile things. They fade, they crumble, they slip away before we can hold them. I learned long ago how to capture them, how to store them in the gears and springs of a clock. I thought I was protecting them, protecting the people who lived them. Clara frowned, struggling to understand. But why keep them all? Why not give them back? Augustus's eyes darkened. Because once a memory is taken, it cannot return without cost. A clock holds it safe, but if it is open like you open this one, it is released forever. It scatters like smoke. Lost. Clara thought of the light that had burst out of the golden watch, the faces she had seen swirling in the air, the laughter and tears that were not her own. Gone now, forever. Her stomach twisted. Whose memory was it? She asked softly. Augustus's hand trembled. He closed his eyes. My wife's. A past revealed. For a long time, the only sound was the ticking of the clocks. Clara didn't dare move. Then Augustus spoke again, his voice hollow. Her name was Eleanor. She had hair the color of wheat in summer, eyes as bright as the sky. She laughed like music, and when she entered a room, the world seemed to glow. His face softened as he spoke, as though he were seeing her again. But then the softness broke into pain. She grew ill, a sickness the doctors could not name. Day by day, her memory slipped away. She forgot where she had placed her keys, then the names of her friends, then her own reflection in the mirror. She was fading before my eyes, piece by piece. Clara's heart ached. That's why you made the clocks. Augustus nodded. I couldn't bear to lose her completely. So I began taking pieces of her memories, her laughter, her stories, the way she looked at me when the sun set. I stored them in these clocks, each one holding something of her that sickness could not touch. He lifted the broken golden watch, tears welling in his eyes. This one held the night she told me she loved me for the first time. And now it's gone. Clara bit her lip hard. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. The old man gave a weary sigh.
No.
You couldn't have, but now you do. The child's question. The weight of his story pressed on Clara's small shoulders, but her curious spirit could not be silenced. She looked around at the hundreds of clocks, each one ticking, each one glowing faintly when she squinted just right. If all of these hold memories, she asked carefully, then whose are the others? Augustus did not answer at once. His gaze traveled slowly across the shelves, as though he could see through each clock into the lives it carried. Some are mine, he said finally, but most belong to this town. Clara's eyes widened. You mean people here? Yes, Augustus said quietly. Memories they would rather forget. Pain too heavy to carry. Regrets too sharp to live with. They came to me, begged me to take them away. And I did. Clara's chest tightened. So, the butcher, the teacher, the mayor, they've all given you pieces of themselves? Augustus's expression hardened. Not given.
Lost.
Do you not understand, child? Every memory taken makes a person less whole. They forget what they asked me to take. They live lighter, perhaps, but emptier. And I, his voice broke. I am the keeper of what they cannot bear. The burden. Clara sat very still. She thought of the people in town, the baker who always seemed distracted, the widow who never cried though her husband had died, the teacher whose eyes looked hollow even when she smiled. Pieces missing, like puzzles never finished. You're carrying everyone's pain, Clara whispered. Augustus closed his eyes.
Yes.
And it is killing me. Clara wanted to argue, but when she looked at him, his trembling hands, his sunken face, the deep lines carved by sorrow, she knew it was true. Still, another question pressed at her lips. If the memories are theirs, shouldn't they choose whether to keep them or not? The old man's eyes snapped open, sharp again. You think pain is a choice? You think sorrow can be carried by everyone? No, child. Some things destroy people if they're not taken away. But some things, Clara said softly, make people who they are. The words hung in the air like a challenge neither could take back. A dangerous curiosity. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder rolling into silence. But inside the shop, a new storm was brewing. Clara's mind spun with questions. If the townsfolk had given away their memories, did they know? Could they ever get them back? What would happen if she opened another clock? Would the memory return to its owner or be lost forever, like Eleanor's first "I love you"? Her fingers twitched at her side. She wanted to try.
She wanted to see.
Augustus seemed to read her thoughts. He slammed his hand down on the workbench, making her jump. "Do not touch them," he barked. "Do you understand? These clocks are not toys. They are lives, fragile and fleeting. You have already destroyed one. Do not destroy more." Clara swallowed, guilt burning in her chest. But curiosity still flickered in her eyes, a flame she could not smother. The clock strikes. That night, long after Clara had been sent home in the rain, Augustus remained in his shop. He worked at his bench, but his hands shook too much to hold his tools. He stared at the broken golden watch again and again, whispering Eleanor's name. Around him, the clocks ticked on, hundreds of them, their rhythms overlapping into a haunting symphony. And then, at midnight, one of them struck. Not with a chime, but with a shudder. The air trembled. A faint crack appeared on its glass face. And for just a moment, Augustus thought he heard voices, angry, restless, trapped. His heart pounded. He stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. "No," he whispered.
Not now.
Not yet. But the crack deepened. And deep in her bed across town, Clara Whitmore dreamed of glowing clocks and voices calling her nom. The morning after the storm, Maple Street smelled of wet earth and fresh rain. Puddles reflected the pale sky, and the townsfolk stepped carefully along the cobblestones as they went about their business. To anyone watching, it seemed like an ordinary day. But to Clara Whitmore, nothing felt ordinary anymore. She walked to school with her satchel bouncing against her side, but her mind was still trapped inside the clockmaker's shop. She could see the glowing golden watch shattering on the floor, could hear Augustus's voice whispering, "Memories." Clara had always thought clocks measured hours and minutes. Now she knew some measured laughter, tears, and love itself. When she passed the shop that morning, she slowed her steps. Through the dusty window, she saw Augustus at his workbench, his shoulders hunched, his face buried in his hands. For the first time, he did not look like a scary old man. He looked broken. Whispers in the classroom. At school, Clara tried to pay attention, but her thoughts kept slipping away. The teacher, Miss Harper, stood at the chalkboard, writing sums with neat white strokes. She called on Clara twice, and both times Clara answered wrong. The other children snickered, but Clara barely heard them. She was thinking about Miss Harper herself, about her eyes, which always looked tired, and her smile, which never quite reached her cheeks. What if Miss Harper had given away a memory? Clara wondered. What if one of those clocks in the shop held her laughter, or the moment she once loved someone? She glanced around the classroom. The butcher's son, Thomas, sat at his desk chewing his pencil. His father always seemed angry, but maybe he hadn't always been that way. Maybe his anger came from something missing, something taken. The thought made Clara shiver. The town had always felt ordinary to her. Now it felt hollow, like a book with half its pages torn out. The visit. That afternoon, Clara couldn't resist. She went back to the shop. The bell chimed softly when she pushed open the door. Inside, the ticking greeted her like 1,000 tiny voices. Augustus didn't look up at first. He sat with his tools spread before him, the broken golden watch still lying open on the bench. "I told you not to return," he said without turning his head. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," Clara admitted. He sighed, finally lifting his eyes to her. "Curiosity will ruin you, child, just as it ruined me." Clara stepped closer, her green eyes burning with determination. "But if those clocks belong to people in town, don't they deserve to know? Don't they deserve a choice?" Augustus's gaze sharpened. "And what would you have me do, Clara? Hand back every painful memory they begged me to take away? Do you want the widow to relive her husband's death? Do you want the baker to remember the fire that burned his home?"
No.
They could not carry it then, and they cannot carry it now. Clara hesitated, but her young heart could not accept his answer. Maybe pain isn't meant to be taken away. Maybe it's meant to be lived with. The old man's jaw tightened, spoken like a child who has not yet learned the weight of sorrow. The crack spread. Before Clara could reply, a sharp sound cut through the shop. Crack. Both of them turned. On the highest shelf, a small wooden cuckoo clock trembled. A thin line split across its glass face. The pendulum jerked wildly, swinging out of rhythm. Augustus's eyes widened. No. He hurried across the room, lifting the clock down with trembling hands. The glow inside it flickered weakly, like a candle about to die. Clara stepped closer. What's happening? The storm, Augustus whispered. The storm has weakened them. One memory has already escaped. Now the others are restless. He pressed his ear against the clock, and for a moment his face went pale. It's the widow's grief, he murmured. If this breaks, she'll remember everything she begged me to take away. Clara's chest tightened. Maybe that's not so bad. Augustus glared at her. You do not understand. Some memories can crush a person. Destroy them. That's why I carry them. That's why I cannot let them break. But as he spoke, another sound echoed from the opposite wall. Crack. Another clock shuddered. Then another. The ticking grew uneven, chaotic, like 100 voices shouting over one another. Augustus's hands shook. It's starting. The child's choice. That night, Clara lay awake in her bed. Rain dripped softly from the roof, but it was the ticking in her head that kept her eyes open. She saw the faces she had glimpsed in the golden watch, swirling like smoke. She heard Augustus's voice, memories fragile and fleeting. She thought of her own father, who had died when she was small. Her mother never spoke of him, never told stories, never cried. It was as if he had never existed. Clara wondered, with a sudden chill, if her mother had once walked into that shop and asked Augustus to take her grief. If that were true, somewhere in the shop a clock might be holding the memory of her father's laugh, the sound of his voice, the way he had kissed her mother's hand. And if that clock cracked, Clara might finally know him. Her heart pounded. For the first time, she didn't know whether to hope or fear. The first return. 2 days later, it happened. Clara was helping her mother hang laundry when a scream echoed down Maple Street. They dropped the wet sheets and ran. At the end of the street, the widow Mrs. Alder was on her knees in front of the bakery, clutching her chest and sobbing. Townsfolk gathered around, whispering, frightened. She just collapsed, someone said. She's crying she never cries, said another. Clara pushed through the crowd. Mrs. Alder's face was red with tears, her voice breaking as she gasped, Henry, Henry, why did you leave me? Clara froze. She had never even heard the widow say her husband's name before. From across the street, Augustus appeared, moving faster than Clara thought possible for an old man. His eyes were wide with panic. He knelt beside Mrs. Alder, whispering urgently, It's back. Your grief is back. But Mrs. Alder only wailed louder, clutching at her chest, rocking back and forth. The memory had returned, heavy and sharp, and it was tearing her open. The crowd looked at Augustus with suspicion. What did you do to her? Someone shouted. Why is she like this? Augustus shook his head, backing away. No, I tried to help her. But his words were drowned in Mrs. Alder's cries. Clara watched, her heart racing. She knew then that the cracks in the clocks were more than just breaks in glass. They were cracks in the town itself. And if more memories returned, the whole town would unravel. Clara's secret resolve. That night, Clara crept once more to the shop. She found Augustus slumped at his workbench, his face pale, his hands stained with oil. The broken cuckoo clock lay before him, its glow extinguished. They'll blame me, he said hoarsely. When the memories come back, they'll think I cursed them. They'll never understand. Clara stepped closer, her small fists clenched. Then we have to fix it. We have to stop the clocks from breaking. Augustus lifted his weary eyes to her. And how do you suggest we do that, child? Clara hesitated. She didn't know, but she knew she couldn't stand by and watch her town collapse. She couldn't stand by and watch her own mother live without the memory of her father, if that was truly what had been taken. "I'll help you," she said firmly. "Whatever it takes." The old man studied her, as though seeing her for the first time. Slowly, he gave a bitter smile. "You're just a child. But perhaps that is what we need. Someone who still believes memories are worth saving." Clara lifted her chin. "Then teach me." And in the dim light of the clockmaker's shop, surrounded by ticking hearts of time, Augustus Hale began to teach Clara Whitmore the dangerous art of holding memories. The rain tapped gently against the small window of the motel room, a steady rhythm that matched the unease in Evelyn's heart. She lay awake on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling as the memories of her past came flooding back. The decision she had made to finally confront her father was like a heavy stone resting on her chest. She had spent years trying to bury the pain, to hide it beneath achievements, friendships, and the comforting routines of her life. But no matter how hard she tried, the wound remained. Now, standing at the edge of something so terrifying yet necessary, she wondered if she had the strength to follow through. Jacob stirred on the bed across from hers, his soft snoring filling the silence. Evelyn envied his ability to sleep, but she also knew Jacob carried his own scars. His journey with her wasn't just about helping her find her father, it was about helping himself too. By morning, Evelyn had resolved not to back down. The small diner across the street was nearly empty when they walked in. The smell of bacon and coffee clung to the air, and the neon sign buzzed faintly above them. Evelyn sat by the window while Jacob ordered. She watched cars rush past on the wet road, each one carrying people with their own stories, their own burdens. Jacob returned with 2 plates of eggs and toast. He set hers down and gave her a searching look. "You didn't sleep, did you?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head. "I couldn't. My mind wouldn't stop running." Jacob nodded, not pushing her. He picked at his food for a while before speaking again. "You know, I used to think facing my past was impossible. But sometimes it's the only way forward." She glanced up at him. "How did you do it?" He smiled faintly, sadness flickering in his eyes. "I didn't, not fully. I'm still trying. But being on this road with you, it's teaching me something. Maybe we don't need to have it all figured out. Maybe we just need the courage to take one step at a time." Evelyn let his words settle in her heart. One step at a time. Later that afternoon, they reached a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of golden wheat. The air felt different here still, almost expectant. Jacob parked the car near a weathered old church, its white paint peeling with age. "This is it," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "This is where he lives. Or, at least, where he used to." Her hands shook as she clutched a slip of paper with an address she had written down weeks ago. Jacob reached across the car and gently squeezed her hand. "You don't have to do this today if you're not ready." But Evelyn shook her head.
No.
"I've run away long enough." The house was small, worn down, but alive. Flowers bloomed in the front yard, and a wind chime tinkled softly in the breeze. Evelyn froze at the sight, her knees weak. It felt surreal after years of wondering. She was finally here. An elderly man stepped onto the porch, his gray hair messy, his eyes sharp but kind. He looked at her with confusion, then something like recognition. "Can I help you?" he asked. Evelyn's voice cracked. "It's me. I'm your daughter." The man's face paled. His lips parted, but no words came. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jacob stayed back, giving them space as Evelyn and her father stood staring at each other. The silence was unbearable, filled with decades of hurt and unanswered questions. Finally, her father spoke, his voice rough and broken. "Evelyn, I never thought I'd see you again." Her eyes burned with tears.
Why?
"Why did you leave us?" His shoulders slumped as though the weight of his past had finally come crashing down. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I thought you'd be better off without me. But not a day has passed that I haven't regretted it." Evelyn's tears spilled freely now, her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. She wanted to scream, to hit him, to demand more answers. But beneath all of that, She also wanted to hear him say the words she had longed for her whole life. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." Evelyn stood frozen, her heart warring with itself. The man before her was broken, but so was she. Forgiveness wasn't easy, and trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt in a moment. Still, for the first time in years, she felt a small flicker of something inside her hope. That night, Evelyn sat by the window of a guest room her father had offered. Jacob sat with her, silent, letting her breathe. "It doesn't fix everything," she whispered. "But I think it's a start." Jacob nodded. "Sometimes, a start is all we need." The rain had stopped, and the moonlight spilled across the quiet town. Evelyn's journey wasn't over. There would be more tears, more anger, and more healing to come. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't running anymore. She had faced the past, and though it hurt, she had survived it. And tomorrow, she would decide what came next. The morning sun rose slowly, painting the quiet town in shades of gold and rose. Evelyn sat on the porch steps of her father's small house, the wooden boards creaking under her weight. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. She had found him. After years of imagining, hating, and longing, she had finally seen his face, heard his voice, and listened to his apology. Yet the ache in her heart didn't vanish. Instead, it shifted into something new, something more complicated. Her father stepped out, holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. His hands trembled slightly as he handed her one. "Thought you might want this," he said, his voice unsure, as though afraid she might reject even this small gesture. Evelyn took it, her fingers brushing his. "Thanks." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the birds and the wind through the chimes. For years she had dreamt of this moment, sometimes angrily, sometimes desperately, but reality was different. He wasn't the villain she had built in her mind, nor was he the hero she had secretly hoped for. He was just human. Finally he spoke. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I can't give you back the years I stole from you. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try to be here now. However you'll allow it." Evelyn's eyes stung with tears. "I don't know if I can forgive you."
Not yet.
"Maybe not ever." Her father nodded slowly, his eyes heavy with regret. "I understand." Later that day, Jacob found Evelyn by the edge of the wheat fields, staring out at the endless horizon. The wind lifted her hair, and her expression was unreadable. "Hey," Jacob said softly. "How are you holding up?" Evelyn exhaled, a shaky breath. "It's strange. I thought finding him would fix something in me. But it didn't. At least, not completely." Jacob stepped beside her. "Healing isn't about fixing. It's about carrying things differently. Sometimes it's about deciding who you want to be, no matter what was done to you." Evelyn turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Do you think I'll ever stop being angry?" Jacob gave a small smile. "Maybe not. But anger doesn't have to own you. You get to choose what to do with it." She nodded, letting his words sink in. That evening, they prepared to leave. Her father stood by the doorway, his posture weary yet hopeful. "I won't ask you to stay," he said. "But I want you to know, my door will always be open. If you ever want to come back." Evelyn looked at him for a long time. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this time he wouldn't disappear. But trust wasn't something built in a day. Still, she found herself whispering, "Maybe one day." His eyes softened, and for the first time since she arrived, she saw relief there, like a man given a second chance, even if only a small one. On the road again, Jacob drove while Evelyn leaned against the window, watching the sunset wash the sky in crimson and gold. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. "Do you regret it?" Jacob asked after a while. Evelyn shook her head.
No.
"It hurt, but I needed it. I think I finally stopped running." Jacob nodded. "That's brave, Evelyn. Most people never face their ghosts." She smiled faintly. "What about you? Do you think you'll face yours?" He chuckled softly, a touch of sadness in his voice. "Maybe someday. Watching you do it, it gives me hope." As night fell, the headlights of the car cut through the darkness. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling a peace she hadn't known in years. Her father's apology didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo the loneliness, the nights of wondering why she wasn't enough. But it gave her something she hadn't had before: choice. The choice to forgive when she was ready. The choice to return or to let go. The choice to live her life without the chains of the past weighing her down. And for the first time, Evelyn realized she wasn't defined by his absence. She was defined by her courage to face it, to survive it, and to keep walking her own road. The open highway stretched endlessly before them, lit by moonlight and possibility. Evelyn leaned her head back, a soft smile on her lips. Her story wasn't over. In many ways, it had only just begun. And as long as she kept moving forward step by step, mile by mile, she knew she would be okay. The end.